The Chicago Race Riots of July 1919. A documentary by Michelle Montoya and Jazmine Saavedra.
3 generations from the end of slavery, black Southerners are on the move in search of a better life. Between 1915 and 1930, 1.5 million head north. 1 in 7 of the entire African American population of the U.S. It's called the Great Migration.
The North represented the promised land to blacks in the South. If you can go north, you can work. If you can go north, you're not going to have to step off the curb when whites walk down the block. If you can go north, you can live in better neighborhoods and your children get a better education.
Imagine a world full of hatred where nothing could be done about it, and not having equal rights as another group of people. In the city of Chicago, violence erupted that caused racial tensions to explode, making Chicago an unsafe place. The Chicago Race Riot of 1919 was one of the many serious racial riots in the United States that occurred in the summer of 1919, also known as the Red Summer. That was one of the most violent and deadliest years of the 20th century, despite the World War I ending, and majority of the African Americans and sailors being demobilized back home. Also, segregation being present and separating the whites with the color brought more tension, especially since the African American population was growing due to the demobilizing of soldiers. The Chicago Race Riot of 1919 changed Chicago in terms of responsibilities that the citizens, Chicago police officials, and politics worsened the problem by not doing what was right that made the outbreak of this violent race riot. Failing to uphold their responsibilities, community members, from citizens to government leaders, created an environment in which a violent race riot could not occur.
During the year of 1919, many African-American soldiers who served in the World War I were being demobilized back home, in which increased the population of the African-Americans. This caused them to seek for more jobs and housing, which created segregation and overcrowded neighborhoods in Chicago. This made the competition of jobs and housing arise, in which increased the racial tensions between those two groups of people, worsening the conflicts of labor and house management. On July 27, 1919, on a hot summer day in Chicago, Eugene Williams was one of the many of the African-American teenagers swimming along the Lake Michigan shore at the 29th Street Beach. At this time, the beaches were racially segregated, in which Eugene Williams accidentally swam across the segregation boundary, in which he was not aware of until a mob of whites stoned him to death. As he was disappearing in the water, his people tried to help him but couldn't for the fact that they were being held back by whites. The police on scene that eyewitnessed Eugene Williams being stoned to death refused to arrest the white suspects and instead arrested African-American mobs, in which were furious and had no cause but trying to help this teenage boy. The death of this teenage boy caused race riots, in which caused 15 whites, 23 blacks killed, but more than 500 injured, and thousands of African Americans were left homeless. This historic event not only affected these two groups of people, but also helped in Chicago because they couldn't let something like this happen again just because a group had more power than over another. The whites did not have the right to kill the innocent teenager for a mistake that they could have been warned for instead of being attacked with rocks and killed. The whites and African Americans had the right to warn each other before taking actions, in which the whites were responsible for Eugene's death and should have accepted their consequences, as well as treating both races equally. Although there was segregation at the time like this, whites were responsible for their actions, in which included punishments they had to face. The Chicago Race Riot of 1919 made an impact in the city of Chicago in the way that their rights and responsibilities, both races, they should have been taken instead of killing this teenage boy.
The question is, who is to blame for the death of Eugene Williams, and why did they not do anything about it? Although the citizens of Chicago were present through what caused the violent race riot to break, in which was the death of Eugene Williams, they seemed to do nothing about it. According to the Chicago Tribune, was it the unequal rights that the African Americans didn't have, or was it that they were scared to do something about it? African Americans who were bystanders during the death of Eugene Williams stood up. Instead of making things better, they worsened. Whites and blacks began to fight, causing a bigger scenario, as these Chicagoans failed to protect the people and doing the right thing. As these Chicagoans crossed boundary lines to do what was right, no one really seemed to care, but ignored it because it was an African American dead, and the whites didn't care about them. This demonstrates how the citizens of Chicago tried to do something about Eugene Williams' death, but failed at doing so, and not meeting their responsibilities. As the black and whites gathered around the beach where Eugene Williams was presented dead, friends of Eugene found a black policeman and led him to the man who threw the rock that hit Eugene Williams and caused his death. But as they were approaching, a white policeman, Daniel Calamhar, prevented the black policeman from arresting the man who didn't make the arrest himself. Instead of arresting the man guilty of Eugene Williams' death, they instead arrested an innocent African American. This reveals how the Chicago police failed at not only protecting and serving the people, but did not do anything about the death of Eugene Williams. Racism is a factor that was faced as the white policeman refused to arrest the man guilty for killing Eugene Williams. As segregation was still present, the Chicago police failed at completing their job, in which was protecting and serving their people, yet did nothing about the death of Eugene Williams. And this made a bigger problem arise that caused the violent Chicago race riot of 1919. The Chicago police were powerless to do much when the citizens raged and formed bigger riots. The police officials did not react to the death or action of the blacks. They were not surprised of the reactions, just on how long it took them to do something about it.